Welcome to Off the Page. I'm Will Cain with Ramesh Ponnuru. So, Ramesh, I think Jonas said before, you're not a lawyer, but you're one of the closest non-lawyers to being a lawyer he's known. Is that right? Or something like that.
Well, I do maintain an interest in legal topics and write about them from time to time. I think it's really important for Americans not to think of the Constitution as being sort of the exclusive property of lawyers.
Okay, well, I want to talk about, I'm going to give you a legal topic here, but it's about Supreme Court appointments. You know, at least in the modern history of Supreme Court appointments, and I think further back than that, presidents with a presumed ideological bent have appointed Supreme Court justices who have surprised them, who have not been exactly what they expected when it comes to how they adjudicated from the bench. I could give you a quick list. President Gerald Ford appointed John Paul Stevens, big liberal. Republican President Reagan appointed both Sandra Day O'Connor and Justice Anthony Kennedy, both swing, not really ideologically bent one way, originalist or living constitutionalist, just kind of there. And then the first President Bush appointed David Souter, again, a reliable member of the left wing of the court. So how does this happen? How do these surprises happen? You would think these presidents would know what they're doing.
And you can go back all the way to Eisenhower and Nixon. Their appointments to the Supreme Court were well to the left of let's say, the electorates that voted for those presidents. I think a couple things were at play there, partly just the changing sociological basis of the Republican Party, its shift to being a more consistently conservative party. But I think the single biggest factor has been the sort of the left-leaning climate of opinion among American legal elites, and particularly in the legal academy. I think that has exerted a powerful liberalizing effect on justices who were Republicans, maybe even in some sense conservative, but didn't particularly have strong convictions.
You're addressing not only the fact that these are surprises, but these were surprises particularly to Republican presidents.
That's right. I think you can only think of one Democratic example. That's Byron White, Kennedy appointee, and he really didn't move all that far to the right. And in a way, he sort of stayed true to the old Democratic Party, which is a more socially conservative party.
Hey, Ramesh, are we to believe that these liberalizing effects don't take place in these judges' careers until they reach the Supreme Court? Or are these presidents who aren't doing their homework?
Well, I think that the stakes on judicial battles have risen over the years, that the sort of careful attention to judges' records and sort of really anything in their past that might reflect on their political leanings, that just wasn't done as much as it is done today. I think you also, one really important thing, if you look over that time period from Eisenhower to the current time, the ratio of conservatives who stay conservatives has increased. And I think that's because of things like the development of the Federalist Society, that there is now a sort of network that can, and with some degree of accuracy, give you an indication of how solid and consistent somebody is.
Hey, you just said sometimes this doesn't happen until they reach the Supreme Court. All of the justices on the Supreme Court at this point have a pretty decent track record. Even Alito's been there for a couple years now, except for Sotomayor. Is there any reason to think that she might be a surprise for Obama, that she could turn out to be more of a originalist, more of a right-leaning judge than he might have expected?
Well, again, if you assume that I'm right in thinking that it's the pressure from legal elites and the legal academy that moves justices, I think almost all of that pressure comes from the left, and there is no reason to think that Sotomayor is going to be a surprise to him. I mean, let's face it, there's no evidence that she is a particularly powerful or independent thinker either. I think she is going to be a cookie-cutter liberal justice, and frankly, I think that's going to be true of almost anybody that President Obama appoints.
That was my next question for you. So you're telling me if all the pressure comes from the left, there would be no hope of any kind of surprise hitting President Obama with Diane Wood or Elena Kagan or any other appointee he may have to replace Stevens?
Well, look, historically, there's been an asymmetry in the way Republicans and Democrats view these issues. Democrats have placed a much higher priority on it. They have been willing to use scorched earth tactics against, say, Robert Bork in 1987 or Clarence Thomas in 1991. When you compare that to the almost votes by acclamation for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer in the early Clinton administration. So that's one sign that the Democrats really are not willing to compromise on this issue. And that also is a reason why they take it so seriously. They're not willing to cut any slack to their nominees. Another asymmetry: Republican presidents typically will say they have no litmus tests, that their nominees on the biggest flashpoint issue, Roe v. Wade, can come down either way on it. Democrats will also pay lip service to not having a litmus test, but they will also say that the nominee has to be for Roe v. Wade, and that's essentially what Obama has said. And that is not just one single issue. If you have a justice who is willing to overlook the text, the history, the original meaning, the structure of the Constitution in order to reach a result that is congenial to liberal sensibilities, then that is going to affect their view of judging across the board.
Well, I give liberals credit for that. There is no more underestimated and no more important role in the United States government than the Supreme Court. And for them to say this is the line in the sand, this is where the battle will be fought, well, then you know what? They at least know what they're fighting for. And I guess I hear you saying the Federal Society needs to start putting more pressure on judges.
Well, but Republicans have been getting better. I mean, the old standard of Republican just being deferential to the president. He gets his pick as long as that pick, has decent credentials. I think that's really it is now outdated given the kind of political role the courts unfortunately play, and the Republicans have slowly wised up to that, which is why you had most Republicans voting against Sotomayor. And I think unless President Obama gives some sign of being open to a non-liberal activist, to some sign that he's dropping his litmus test, I think you're going to see most Republicans vote against his nominee this time, too.
Okay. You guys can check Ramesh out on nationalreview.com. Follow me on Twitter at Will Cain to see what interviews are coming up. Give me suggestions for questions. Thanks.